Hello, this is psychicpodcasts.com. I'm Psychic Sahar. We're grateful to Dr. PMH Atwater for being our guest again. In this episode, we talk about near-death experiences in children, how they happen, and the aftermath of such an experience. I hope you'll enjoy this interview.
That's fine.
Hello, Sahar.
Hello, Dr. Atwater, and welcome back to the show.
Well, here we go again.
Well, yesterday was interesting, and we talked about near-death experience phenomena in adults, and today's focus is on children. What can you tell us about near-death experiences in children?
Oh, my dear, I could talk for hours. Let me kind of condense it as much as I can. Let me first of all make it very clear that children have basically the same near-death experiences as adults do.
Mm-hmm.
They deal with the same pattern of after effects that adults do.
Right.
But they do it differently. And that's what we need to recognize, and that is what is not being recognized.
Yes.
All of the previous research that is done in the field on children have been done by adults, comparing the children to adults and looking at them through adult eyes.
That's a very good point.
My book, The New Children and Near-Death Experiences, is the first study yet done looking at children through their own eyes and tracking them as they see what is happening in their lives, going through their pictures, their drawings, spending time with them, really getting down on their level, not on the adult level.
Yeah.
When you're working with children, you can never have your eyes above the child's eyes. So depending on how tall the child is, that tells you how tall you are.
That's right.
And if they're wiggling around on the floor, then you're wiggling around on the floor.
That's right.
So that's one of the things that you have to be very careful of. And of course, looking at their drawings and then getting in their space at their level of consciousness. And you really do have to make that effort. When you do, you begin to realize that most children's experiences, when I say children, I'm speaking of young children,
yes,
most of their experiences are fairly brief. They're that initial type of near-death experience where it's something like a brief visit from a being on the other side, or a quick out-of-body experience, or maybe an encounter with the loving nothingness, or the friendly dark, or a special voice, or something like that. And maybe just one of those, or maybe two or three of those, but yet it is enough to make incredible differences in their lives, in their brain pattern, in their thoughts, in their body, their nervous system, and so forth. And I think it depends a lot on what age they are. Now, I want to be very clear in my research base of children.
Yes.
And let's see, did I write down here anywhere what I was going after from birth to the age of 15 years. So that's the broad span I was using. So I was going into the teen years, the early teen years,
right,
as well. And I think yesterday I said 244. It's actually 277
right,
kids that were in my research base.
Right.
And of those children, 76% had the initial experience. So it's something very brief, but yet very impactful. And this is a statement I want to make. I hope everybody hears this. A near-death experience is not just a shift in attitude. It's not just perhaps a slight change in personality. It's not just a shift in focus. A near-death experience is a very intense experience. It is very real. It is very physiological. It is not a dream. It is something that affects the individual as if they were hit by a power punch. So we're not talking about a shift in consciousness here,
Right.
which we can do through altered states of consciousness, meditation, and this kind of thing.
That's right.
We're talking about something more intense, more sudden, more impactful.
Dr.
And one of
Atwater,
the-
how does it happen with children? Is it also under the same criteria as adults, that when you feel, when you go undergo
exactly
threatening
the
experience?
same. And most of the kids in my research base had their experience through drowning.
Oh, I see.
There was a lot from suffocation. The number one was drowning.
Drowning.
Most of the children in my research base died because of drowning.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of them because of suffocation. A number of them dying on the operating table during surgery. A lot of them from child abuse and also sibling abuse.
Oh, I see.
We're not looking at that.
Right.
It's sibling abuse too. You know, brothers and sisters can pack a mean
Absolutely.
punch.
Yes.
And especially the suffocation, how many siblings will try to suffocate the one brother or sister that they don't like.
Right.
And that happens a lot, too. I had a number of them that were hit by lightning. I had a few of them that had it during the dream state, but it was a particular dream state where they almost died during the dream state. So they were not hospitalized, but they still went into that crisis, and then they had to go to a doctor later, or the hospital later. So we're talking here basically same.
Right.
Where we deviate is how it affects them.
Yes.
And the first point I want to make of both adults, teens, and children is that a signature feature of the near-death experience is they come back smarter than they were before. In some cases, very much smarter, but at least smarter.
Yes.
No matter how long they're dead. And I also want to establish that these are people on the average, I'm speaking averages here, who were without vital signs between 5 to 20 minutes.
Right.
5 to 20 minutes. Now that's the average
a long
adult
time,
and children.
Yes.
And we know that, you know, the brain must have oxygen within 3 minutes. You've got brain damage, and this is why the signature feature that there are some that come back brain damaged, but not that many. Very few. In fact, they come back brain enhanced. So this is why we have to take a good look at this, because it's not quite what we think it is.
Right.
And in my broad research base, birth till the age of 15 years, 48% tested out genius on standard IQ tests afterward with no genetic markers to account for the jump.
Incredible.
You could trace the jump back to when they had their near-death experience. In other words, right after they had their near-death experience. And their scores were between 150 to 160.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of your teachers will say, well, scores of 134 to 136, that's genius. And other teachers say, no, it has to be 140. These are kids on the average that are testing out between 150 to 160. Now, I had two clusters in my research base.
Mm-hmm.
My biggest cluster was between 3 years of age and not quite 6.
Right.
And then my second cluster was between birth and the age of 15 months.
Uh-huh.
If I look at my first cluster between
3 to 6.
3 to not quite 6 years of age,
Right.
81% were scoring 150 to 160 on standard IQ tests afterward.
Incredible.
Yeah, those were old enough to be tested, of course.
Right.
And from birth to 15 months, when they're old enough to be tested, especially if they had a dark light experience instead of a bright light experience, they're testing out, starting, almost all of them became genius. There was only one that didn't. And with those kids, their scores start at between 181 and 182 and go up into the 200s.
Right.
So,
amazing.
So what we need to look at here is birth trauma. We need to and preemies. We need to take another look at what's happening to the little ones, because what the research suggests because they are so young, that their brain is being rewired.
Yes.
It's almost as if they go through a second birth. They're being rewired and reconfigured. And most of them come back abstracting, but these little ones really abstract. They very much live in a different world, and they have a tough time accepting this world. Did I give you the example of that little kid in the first grade that drowned?
No.
Oh, okay, it's a little boy. It's good to have examples.
Yeah,
This is a little boy
intriguing.
in the first grade who drowned about halfway through school. He was living in the state of Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
That is to say, in the United States,
yes.
the state of Georgia.
Yes.
And so when he's well enough to go back to school, first grade, all the other kids are still reading C-Spot, Run, Dick and Jane, and all these simple stuff. He's going back reading Greek mythology, goes up to his teacher and asked her why the book Robinson Crusoe was ever written.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, that'd pull him out of first grade.
Amazing.
But, we talked a little bit about schooling with the new kids before, and the new kids are a lot like the near-death kids. So the same point is taken. What are we going to do with these youngsters whose brain has been rewired and reconfigured? They're very much different. Now, this can cause real problems at school. It can cause real problems in the home.
Yes.
Because these are kids that are more in tune, they're familiar with other worlds. They have an unusual concept of home.
Yes.
To them, home is on the other side of the curtain. It's not on this side. Many of them will lose their bonding to their parents. They will, we talk about all these lovely things. They see angels and they talk with the disincarnate, and they have a common sense of the future and a love of music and, increased sensitivities and higher IQs and oriented to social justice, and we can go on and on and on. But where the tire hits the road is how do they live their lives after that until they're old enough to
readapt, and deal with it. Yeah.
Be decision makers. The parents are saying, "Shut up! I don't want to hear you," or "That's just your imagination," or for whatever reason, it's very difficult for a child to be heard. And even above and beyond that, it's very difficult for a child to have that sense that they're being trusted, let alone heard, that anybody's believing them. And so also in my research base is the downside of children's near-death experiences. And the downside is that 1/3 turn to alcohol within 5 years of their experience to somehow soften the blow of being able to communicate, relationships, how do you, the peer group, the age mates, this kind of thing, how do you fit back in when you can see right through what everybody else is doing?
Yes.
And 21% attempted suicide to get back to the other side.
Oh, gosh.
Now, that's a high figure.
Yes.
We need to look at that figure because children do not think as adults do. They do not, especially the little ones, they don't think in terms of suicide as being wrong or bad. They don't think in terms of consequences.
Absolutely.
This is the child's logic. And the logic is, when I wasn't breathing, I was in this bright world with all these loving people. When I started breathing again, I was taken from this world, or I couldn't go back to this world again. I would like to go back to this world. Aha! The only way I can go back to this world in a child's mind is to stop my breathing. So they try to stop their breathing to get back
to that magnificent world, yes.
Necessarily of stress, although for some of them it's stress related. or fear or that kind of anger related. But with most of them, it's that simple logic of getting back. And so I'm yelling as loud as I can, Sahar, and I'm not doing over the podcast because I don't want to break everybody's eardrums. But please teach these children guided visualization. Anywhere you have once been in consciousness, you can return to. I don't care what your age is. You can do it in prayer states. You can do it in meditative states. Yes, kids can practice meditation. What about the 1-minute meditator?
Yeah, absolutely.
Teach the visualization. Teach them how to relax and lower their consciousness so that they can go back and enjoy this other world
without
and
having
then
to
return to this world at will.
Yes.
And so in my book I teach.
You talk about that.
Near-death experiences has a large resource section, lots of tips, lots of suggestions, all kinds of advice
on how to deal with
I
this.
Could throw in there.
Brilliant. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Atwater, do parents realize that this is happening to their children? Because it seems to me the parents need to know how to deal with this.
For the most part, no.
Yes.
For the most part, no. You've got some doctors and nurses who are educated about near-death experiences and are alert to them, but most are not. And I do, as of 2 years ago, I don't know about today, but as of 2 years ago, I could not find any psychologist or any psychiatrist or therapist or counselor in our nation who were trained in or aware of or alert to how to handle child experiencers of near-death states, even if they were 20 or 30 years old.
Interesting. That's a shame,
the interesting thing is, it takes an adult about 7 years to integrate their experience. With a child, it takes from 20 to 30.
Really?
If a child does not integrate, Sahar, they compensate. Children compensate. It's a survival skill.
Yes.
They don't connect the dots. And it's not until they're much older that they begin to connect the dots. So this is why we need our professionals
to guide them,
educated in how to handle kids.
Dr.
And they can get that education just from that book.
We were talking yesterday, sort of off mic, how through your life and your career you've gathered a lot of data, and we were talking how you look forward to the day when you can analyze all this data that you have researched.
Well, I'm going to do that now.
Brilliant. That brings a question to mind, really, since we talked about this. Spiritually speaking, or really on any level from a different perspective, do we know why these experiences happen? Is there a wisdom to it?
Well, lots of people have theories about that. Lots of people have knowings about that. Lots of people have absolutes about that. I have learned to be very careful of that entire broad spectrum.
Yes.
Especially psychics who say this, this, and this. And I love psychics. I consider myself highly intuitive.
Yes.
But I think we have to avoid the trap
of
saying this is the way it is.
Yeah.
I think Kenneth Ring, one of our premier researchers in the field, had the most wonderful explanation I've ever yet come across. And he said, I believe near-death experiences are spiritual experiences. And I truly feel that's enough to say.
Wonderful.
And that way people can decide for themselves.
Yes.
I can play the game of I was slated to have this, I signed up for it as a soul before I came in, and maybe that's true. But maybe not. I mean, I don't know. I can't really say for sure.
Yes.
But what I can say is that my own 3 near-death experiences totally changed my life in such a way that it's almost as if there's a line of demarcation between before and after. And no, I'm not a walk-in. And for those people who are onto this phenomenon of walk-ins, a soul walks in.
Yes, and takes over the same body.
Takes over the body.
Yes.
And I challenge a lot of that. In my lifetime, I have met 4 people who I truly feel were real walk-ins.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of them, I think, were spiritual experiencers of some kind,
Yes.
who went through an experience that changed them, as do near-death states.
Right.
In other words, a near-death state can change you so completely, it's as if you have become another person. But my research suggests that that's not at all what's happening.
With the walk-ins.
That's not what's happening. What's happening is that we are becoming more of ourselves. We're not a different soul. We're more of the soul we once were. Our soul enlarges and accelerates and expands. In my work that I've been able to do on the soul level, I've come to realize that there's no human body who could encapsulate or cradle or hold all of their soul. It would burn up the body.
Right.
So the spiritual experiences and transformational experiences, regardless of what kind they are, I believe are for the purpose of enabling our body and our mind to merge with and hold more and more of our soul.
To recalibrate, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And from your research, Dr. Atwater, all these years, is there an indication that the near-death experiences are happening more frequently now than before, or is it just a question of becoming aware of these experiences?
Well, that's a loaded question, because as of a couple of years ago, I could have said an unqualified yes.
Answer. Yeah.
Absolutely
yes.
Or an unqualified yes. Absolutely yes. They're occurring more and more and more and more. But as of a couple of years ago, there is this new drug now that is used in especially in hospitals, whereby in surgery or accidents or extreme cases, they give people this drug so that they won't remember anything.
Oh my God.
And these people don't remember. They don't remember near-death experiences. So are we medicating ourselves out of these? I don't know. But I can say that overall, globally, as our technology improves in hospitals, we're getting more and more of these cases, and certainly with children. We're bringing back more and more children who would have died even just 5 years ago.
Amazing.
Because we have new and modern resuscitation techniques and new machinery, and it has made a difference.
Dr. Atwater, I'm grateful for your time and all your visits, being a guest on psychicpodcast.com, and I wish you very, very Merry Christmas, and God bless you for all the work that you do.
Well, thank you very much, and God bless each and every one. I'll be like, little Tim here. God bless us all.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
For more information on Dr. Atwater's work, please check her website, www.pmhatwater.com, and stay tuned for more interviews from psychicpodcasts.com.